Could weed reform be on the horizon for us? Well, word has it that it is actually being discussed in the MAGAverse. Cenk, before we get into the details, you already know that Republicans are ideologically against weed as a matter of principle, but they're sometimes willing to look past their principles if they think they can make some money off of it. But this also raises questions as to why Biden didn't do more to legalize weed while he was the president. What do you think before we get into the story?
This one is both super simple and super complicated. It's super simple because the great majority of Americans, including the majority of right-wing voters, want to legalize weed. And Trump is actually going in that direction. Good news, okay? So we'll get into those details in a second. But the complicated part is the right-wing media is against weed, even though right-wing voters are for it. Trump is in favor of moving weed to a lower schedule, but only because he might be getting paid off by donors. I normally hate donor control of politicians, but I agree with them in this case. Well, it got complicated. Okay, so let's give you what's happening, and I'll give you my judgment on who's right and who's wrong.
Okay, so let's get the details. All right, so what Trump's reportedly thinking about doing is not legalizing weed entirely, so don't get too excited, but just to review and update the current federal restrictions on marijuana. Republican leaders are already saying that this is a very bad move for Trump. So currently, the US lists marijuana as a Schedule I drug, the same as heroin and LSD. Schedule I drugs are, quote, drugs with no currently accepted medical use and a high potential for abuse. I like that it rhymes. Trump would just be reclassifying marijuana as a Schedule III drug, which means it would be easier to research and it would boost the legal cannabis industry, which is still heavily constrained by state and federal laws. But going back to that point about potential medical uses for marijuana, Trump seems conflicted. So on Monday, he told reporters, medical for pain and various things, I've heard some pretty good things, but for other things, I've heard some pretty bad things. Great, thank you for that insight. Far-right podcasters and commentators have also weighed in on the conversation. So no country of potheads has ever thrived or ever achieved anything at all. Every city that legalized it became an even bigger basically overnight, and that was the Daily Wire's Matt Walsh said that. Not sure what country of potheads he's referring to, and Republicans don't like cities anyway, so what do they care? Jack Posobiec presented a different anti-weed argument, saying America deserves better, our kids deserve better. I don't want to have to be smelling weed anytime I take my kids anywhere in a city or a national park. He said that on his podcast on Monday. And Michael Knowles tapped into a more cultural, partisan aspect of the debate, saying we're all for cultivating virtue, either stoic or Christian, but it doesn't mean we don't like pleasure. It's just that we prefer traditional pleasures. The left is more comfortable just kind of vegging out, but they should not be, because sloth is bad for the individual and for society. So by more traditional pleasures, he means like cigars and alcohol, like Mad Men, but like it's just so ridiculous. Like, anyway, let's move on. Okay, so meanwhile in Texas, we have our own battle over this plant. A Republican attorney general here in Texas recently went viral for smoking a joint live on social media. In a related post, she had a picture of herself with a joint in her mouth, and in the caption she wrote, "Free the plant, Dan." Dan is referring to our Texas lieutenant governor, who is like weirdly anti-weed. Like, it's weird how anti-weed he is. But as this video went viral, garnering support from both sides of the political aisle, the Texas response was predictably very tone deaf. She is now facing up to 5 years in prison over the stunt. It's so ridiculous. None of it makes any sense, But here in Texas, we do have very restrictive laws against weed. It doesn't make any sense. Like, there's a place here that was called Hempstead, for God's sakes. Like, we used to have the plant here. It used to be a cash crop in this country, but then it got so politicized and people got so weird about it, and now no one's allowed to have it. I can't use hemp cloth to make like a shirt out of, even, like that's how far removed these people are from reality. But if Trump can make it happen, I'll give him credit for that. I don't necessarily like his motives for doing so, but whatever, I'll take a win where I can get it.
Yeah, I have the scorecard. I'm ready to declare who's guilty and innocent. So let's start with Joe Biden. Why are we starting with Joe Biden? Wait, brother, you had 4 years to move it from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3. And we told you to do that. It was super easy. And you would have gotten a lot of credit for it. It's over 70% of the American people want it legalized, let alone moved to a Schedule 3 drug. But Sleepy Joe just couldn't find a way to do it. I'm gonna tell you these hilarious things that happened. Back in 23, Biden's president, they formally, as Department of Health and Human Services, formally recommended rescheduling marijuana. Oh, it has been formally recommended. Formally recommended. 24, Biden's Department of Justice issued a, quote, a notice of proposed rulemaking. We have a notice of proposed rulemaking, okay? Almost there. Then we're in January 25, they're still in charge. And an administrative hearing got scheduled. Ooh, by the way, the president can just move it by himself anytime he wants. All this is nonsense. They're trying to run out the clock. Pretend before the election, oh, you young whippersnappers who like the devil's lettuce, we're on your side. Oh, go, we ran out of time. We were going to do it. We had an administrative hearing. What happened to that hearing, by the way? It was scheduled for January of 25. Biden's still in charge. But it was then indefinitely postponed. Oh, golly, gee willikers, unlucky again, due to, quote, procedural disputes and interlocutory appeals. That is so Democratic politics. We were gonna help the American people. We were gonna be on the right side of a really popular issue. But gosh darn it, an interlocutory appeal stopped us. You go, oh my God, unbearable. So Trump comes in and goes, all right, why don't I steal this knucklehead's thunder? I'll move it from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3. That's super popular. So Biden guilty. If Trump does it, he hasn't done it yet, then I will give him credit, okay? Now, it's partly because the donors want him to and he got millions of dollars from people in the weed industry. But hey, look, I don't want the donors in charge and I hate if it's because of that, right? But the policy is correct, right? So I'm still in favor of the policy despite that, but the donors are always guilty. Okay, and by the way, I don't mean general donors and I don't mean grassroots donors. I always mean either corporate donors or foreign governments, okay? Or people supporting foreign governments. Okay, so now we get to the right-wing media. These are my favorite. I mean, Democrats and Biden are in the middle of blowing it on this issue. The American people, oh, here's a quick one. The right-wing voters, along with all other voters, now a majority of them want weed legalized. All of you not guilty, wonderful, you're totally right. In a democracy, you should win, but God forbid a democracy should break out, okay? So now we get to right-wing media. We don't mind the pleasures of life, but we prefer traditional drugs like alcohol and cocaine. You know, Wall Street was all on cocaine in the 1980s, 90s, probably still now. So like, it's not like they didn't do drugs, they did worse drugs, right? But no, that's okay, it's traditional. But all right, let's put that out because they didn't say cocaine, they said alcohol. Yeah, because when you're sloshed, you're really productive. They're claiming that they're more productive on their alcohol than weed. Come on, brother. I mean, do you know when the world got way more productive? Like, this is literal. It happened in the 1800s. The water was contaminated for a long, long time in world history. Water contamination, especially in the cities, was a giant problem. So since they couldn't drink the water, everybody would have beer. That's why we couldn't get anything done. Everybody was drunk at all times. So when they finally figured out coffee, the coffee would actually boil the water and it gave you caffeine, which is also a different drug, right? But it was an upper instead of a downer. And then the world got way more productive. So the idea of like, we'll get back to productivity once we do 3 martini lunches and are constantly drinking whiskey and bourbon. No, that's absurd, totally, utterly absurd. But look, guys, most important of all is, what happened to freedom? So isn't it weird that the right-wing media is against right-wing voters and is against the idea of freedom completely? Like so in a sense, this is a culture war. They're on the wrong side of the culture war, and I'm thrilled about it. Good, good, good. Keep going. Michael Knowles, Matt Walsh, Sobiak, all of you guys. Continue to be idiots. Go out there and be like, oh yeah, weed is bad. Take away people's freedom. They shouldn't be allowed to do what they want. This is America, and our version of America would involve tyranny. You're not allowed to use your body in the way that you want. You're not allowed to have fun. Well, you can, well, as long as it's, whiskey. What are these?
Yeah.
Come on, if you're gonna be idiots, have at it, Hoss. Makes my job easier.
Yeah, Cenk, and like try to take away their alcohol and see what kind of reaction you get from just that. I have a quick anecdote from like a few years ago. We had this progressive guy running for mayor here in Houston. He was never gonna win, but he still, threw his name in the ring. And a big part of his platform was on environmentalism, but also legalizing weed. And those two things were connected. And he had a ton of great reasons as to why this plant, literally just a plant that grows in the ground, should be legalized. For example, if you plant the plant at the bottom of ditches and retention ponds, it actually helps to absorb floodwaters. And God knows we need that in a place like Houston. So he laid out all of these reasons. A lot of them were environmental reasons. Also, ways to undercut oil production. We can make fabrics out of hemp instead of like polyester fabrics, things like that, right? And he laid out all these reasons. And then some Republicans sitting in the crowd at this town hall, he just said, this guy just wants to get high all day. Like, he's literally running for mayor. This isn't just some lazy stoner. It was unbelievable. And this guy just chose to not hear anything that the guy said. So that's kind of like the culture war aspect that we're up against. And yeah, there are like racial or even classist reasons as to why people feel one way versus the other. I feel like the right has really romanticized this idea, like I said, with Mad Men, like this strong, powerful man just chomping on a cigar, just holding it in his teeth and like drinking an old fashioned or something like that. That is way more like cool in their minds, just alcoholism, instead of just some guy who's like, I don't know, painting a picture and smoking a joint. Also, people who are smoking weed, they're way less violent and volatile than people who are drinking alcohol. Yeah. But like I said, if you try to take away their alcohol, they won't hear anything about it. It's their freedom. It's not a problem. And that's why they cling to this idea that weed is dangerous, even though alcohol is, according to the data, way more dangerous to society than weed is. So.
Yeah, we're not taking away alcohol, and everybody's gonna smoke weed, whether it's legal or not legal. So it's trying to make it illegal. Schedule 1 drug, the most dangerous drug. We can't even do research on it. It's so dangerous. If you see marijuana, your head will blow up. I mean, lunatics, both Republican and Democratic politicians, my whole life have been saying maniacally untrue things like that. I'm so sick of it. Look, last things, guys. So that Republican lady in Texas, if you're in favor of making marijuana, keeping marijuana illegal, really, you're gonna want her to go to prison for 5 years? For smoking a joint, for 5, she's a Republican attorney general in Texas. One of the attorney generals in Texas. 5 years in prison. You gotta be out of your goddamn mind, right? But like when the right wing does the culture wars, but they pick the wrong side, oh, I love it. Which is most of the time, right? I'm talking about the media figures. So you're going to, these same guys are usually both against weed and against porn. Good luck, brothers and sisters. Please run on that. Like the left sometimes makes a mistake of running on extreme policies. Please run on anti-weed and anti-porn campaigns, okay? You'll never win another election in America.
That's Texas, Cenk. That's where I live. We have no porn and we have no weed here.
Trust me,
all
you
outlawed,
do.
So
you do. It's just not legal.
This is the life we live. Yeah.
Okay. So if Republicans keep going like that, people might even elect Democrats.
Yeah. I mean,
even in Texas. Every time you ring the bell below, an angel gets his wings. Totally not true, but it does keep you updated on our live shows. Every time you ring the bell below, an angel gets his wings. Totally not true, but it does keep you updated on our live shows.